Hello and welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about a little opening mistake or patsa move that many bad players make and that you can actually exploit to be directly winning on move 4, essentially. How this goes, it arises from the very common Queen's Gambit. So you start with d4, your opponent plays d5, you play c4 to enter the Queen's Gambit. Now a lot of beginners or a common advice here is to play e6 because it's just very reputable and easy to play move, but a lot of beginners don't like it because it prevents the bishop from developing. So a lot of beginners think, especially who learn about the Caro-Kann, for example, think actually c6 here is a better move because you're still being able to develop the bishop. And after white plays knight c3, then a lot of beginners will play bishop to f5. And this is actually already in an accuracy or a mistake. You can already see none of the master games really have this except for 5. But it's common in the lead chess database. So I actually looked at the different rating distributions, and in 1600 rated games, about 17.2% of people play this move. So it's very, very common mistake. In 1800 rated games, it's 12%. In 2000 rated games, around 7. In 2200, just 1 in 40 basically, and yeah, in 2500 rated games it almost never happens. But so you will benefit most from this video if you are actually rated below 2000, let's say. So what's the problem with this move? The reason is that white has a strong response, which consists of taking here, and after they take back, which is, you can see, the only move in this position, then you have this powerful move queen b3. And what this does is, as the arrows show, it threatens to take this pawn, and this pawn is also pressured by 2 pieces. So you're essentially winning a pawn here. And for example, if they just go back, even in that case, you just win a pawn. So what I'm trying to establish here is, if you don't know how to punish this, the most easiest way is to go with the queen in the center, because it's actually sometimes really dangerous for white, because white can actually, that the queen can get trapped, and if they grab pawns, their development can fall behind. So yeah, there can be pressure on white. So the safest is with the queen, because this is directly having the queens stare at each other, so you're basically forcing or encouraging a queen trade. So this is usually the risk-free way to go up a pawn if it's possible to capture the center pawn. But I will show more accurate or better punishments in the next chapters. So let's look at the main line, in quotes, of the Mankin Trap. So after d4, d5, c4, c6, there's knight c3, bishop f5, question mark, cd, cd, and queen b3. And here I divided the moves essentially by how common they are. So the most common response, and you can see there's a lot of this is very diffuse. There are many moves that you will encounter in this position, but you basically only have 2 different concepts that you need to remember. So I will show this at the end. But in 40% of games, e6 was played by black here. And basically, you're trying to win even more material. So your plan is to first of all, go here with the bishop, which is already putting stress on this diagonal. And then later on, you will try to play e3 in this line to develop this bishop and basically create a sort of fork here where you can also win an exchange. So trade the bishop for the rook. Just to look at how this looks like concretely. So e6, you know, black can obviously only defend one of the pawns, so this is defending this pawn, but this pawn remains undefended, so that's the one we're going to take. So we're usually going to look for the undefended pawn. Here's only one move possible, knight d7, because otherwise black loses the rook. Then, as I said, bishop f4, which also prevents the rook from coming here and punishing our bad queen placement. As you can see, g5 is the engine move, but no one plays this. The most common move here is developing this knight to f6, which looks normal enough, but it's actually running into our plan. So as I said, our plan was to play e3. And here the most common move is bishop e7, but any other move also isn't much better, because after that we have the combination to win the exchange. So after bishop c7 we are threatening the queen, so there's only one move, which is moving the queen over, and then we have bishop a6. And if they take, if they trade queens, then obviously we have both bishops here, and they are just controlling all the spaces that this rook can move to. And if they don't take, if they for example castle, then we just also take the queen, and they have to retake with the rook, so we have the same outcome. So yeah, white wins an exchange in this line, and as you can see, the win rate is 83%, because you're up an exchange plus you're still up the original pawn that you won. So this is very, very comfortable for white. The accurate defense for black here is queen c8, which is the second most common move. After queen c8, you basically, most of the games continue with a queen trade here, and then you can't really trap this rook so easily. So after queen trade, you can try e3 still. Maybe they have bishop b4, and most common move or best move here was knight e2, then bishop d3. So it's not really, doesn't really look that bad for black actually. Yes, so that's the e6 line. So basically you're trying to go for this, you're going for one pawn plus you're going for the bishops, for the double bishop maneuver, as I call it later on. So the second most common, or the next move I want to talk about is queen d7. So queen d7 actually still doesn't do a good job of defending, because yes, this is defended once, but this is still also defended once, right? And we have two attackers on this. So no matter what black does, it will always lack defenders. So the most accurate move here is, so the most common move here is queen takes d5, which is fine, which is, I showed at the beginning, a pretty safe way to go up one pawn. Especially because it's also, after queen trade, it's also putting the knight here, which is threatening a fork. That's also a pretty strong move. But there's an even better move, and it starts with e4. And the reason we play e4 instead of e3 is because e4 immediately forces black to deal with this threat. So they are obviously going to lose the bishop otherwise. So this is, so they don't have time to consolidate their queen side, which is where they have problems, because they just lined up the bishop with the queen with the king. So if we had a bishop here, this would be somewhat deadly. At the moment, it still doesn't work because this knight exists here. So this knight can block at the moment, but we can see how we can pressure this knight in a second. So after e4, they have to deal with it. I think the easiest move is to take with the bishop. After that, you can try the bishop b5. It depends, you can do different move orders. But let's say bishop b5 is the most obvious because it's the most direct threat. And this forces knight c6 pretty obviously, because all other moves lose the queen essentially. And now knight takes e4 is actually just winning. And the reason is, after knight takes d4, d takes e4, you have d5, and this is exploiting this pin here. So this piece, this knight is going to be lost, and this is of course protected by the queen here. So this queen is protecting both of these pieces. So yeah, you win a piece, and basically black can resign in this position. Yeah, after this you will be up a piece and a pawn. Yeah, I think that's plus 5.4, so it's pretty good. There was obviously a game in the database where black still won, but let's ignore that. The next move I want to talk about is knight f6. So this, we discussed e6 at the beginning, and knight f6 does the same thing, also protects the sender. So we're going to play the same idea. We're going to take on b7. They're going to play here. Now we don't want to actually go forward this way because it's actually not that effective. Yeah, I also analyzed this, so let's look at this quickly. This is obviously threatening to fork here, which because the king is actually trapped here, you have to take with the queen. So this would lose the queen. And as you can see, 17 of 19 people found rook c8 in this position, which defends against the threat. And then then white can maybe take a pawn and is up 2 pawns, but you can see the evaluation isn't too great. So it's a little bit suspicious because black can get developed and counterattack white pretty quickly. We only have one game here in this position, which was won by black. And most people don't even take on a7 because they recognize maybe that it's going to be a bit dangerous. So the other thing that you shouldn't do is taking this 3 pawn in the middle, which is knight takes d5, which looks like it wins a pawn after they take and take. Black could play e6, which is the only good move. After queen b3, for example, you can gain another tempo with the rook. And here the most common move is queen d1, which is pretty depressing actually. And the win rate is slightly better for white, but if black, for example, finds rook takes b2, yeah, this is just not a single game with white that he won here, for example. And the reason you can take on b2 is if you take back, then this bishop gets in here in this diagonal, and you have to block with the queen. So it's pretty good find. This rook takes b2 move, which 8 out of 26 people did, but even if they don't find it, you still have a lot of counterplay because white just had to spend multiple tempi just moving back the queen. And the other move is bishop f4, which was okay in the other line, but in this line it's somewhat problematic because e5 just hits the bishop. So that's all that's to say about this. So what do I recommend? I recommend knight f3 because this is also fighting for control of this, so they can't play e5 so easily. So most common continuation by far here is e6. And now we can finally play bishop f4 with the desired effect. Most common move here is bishop e7. And then we can play the idea from the e6 line again. So after e3 castles, we can put the bishop here again. Queen goes here, bishop goes here, queen trades. But the difference in this line is because black could castle one move sooner, they can actually just go here and preserve the rooks. But this is still a very strong position. I mean, you can even see the best move according to leeches is going here, right? Which doesn't look like it makes sense because it gives up the exchange. But if you go here, you're very inactive. Like, I mean, what are these two rooks doing? They literally cannot move to any square without being taken. So I don't know how you're going to develop the rooks. Okay, but at this level, maybe material is actually more important than activity because activity gets wasted at this level a lot. So who knows? But it's still easy or a good line to remember because it's the exact same idea as in the e6 line, where you're trying to trying to win the exchange. Good, and the next line here is b6, next most common move, and this is already also an idea we're familiar with. So we once again have this idea with e4, knight f3, and bishop b5, and the move order is slightly different here. So here you want to start with knight f3 after e6, which is the most common move. Then you play e4, and after d takes e, you can play the bishop where you want them, and after knight d7, then you just put the knight in the middle. So it's a pretty straightforward plan with the same moves, and black is already in a lot of trouble. So if we take here, they either have to move or take back with the queen, which looks bad. So this is the obvious way to protect this pawn, and you can see in 138 games you use this knight to protect the other knight. And okay, I think g4 is a bit ridiculous, but bishop g5 threatens that knight. Bishop e7 is the most common move here, but we take regardless because we're removing the defender essentially. And if you just take with the bishop, this just loses immediately. But this is the most common move actually. But let's look at the tougher line where black finds the g takes f6. And even there we're still very strong because we still get this piece with knight takes. But it looks like black has a counter here with a6. And it looks like they can cut off the defense. So for example, if we go back, they can put a pawn here, and then they can just take this knight. Well, if we go back, this would be very bad because because the bishop is also trapped. But even if we go here, they can attack us again. So we want so the easiest way is actually to go out with a tactic, which is knight takes b6 check. This is essentially forcing them more or less to take our bishop, and then we take the rook. So once again, we win an exchange. And strangely enough, it's saying castles is better than queen takes a8, but I think the lines actually transpose. So we basically can't escape with a knight. So this is why it's suggesting a strange move. But queen takes a8 is natural. Queen takes b5 check, king f8, and as you can see, black doesn't get to castle in this variation. So this is why castling first was considered better in this line. But yeah, I don't think many people will find this. So last move I want to discuss is what I would consider the best move. Wait a minute, I don't think I've actually covered this line in the knight f6 line. Oh, wait. Yeah, I don't think I've covered it. So, yeah, I said I think I went through all the moves that you shouldn't play, but I didn't go through knight f3. Or did I? Oh yeah, I did go over knight f3. No, wait, I'm thinking of a different line. Okay, no, I think I've covered all the lines. Yeah, except, there's queen b6 still. So, after queen b6, I think you can even calculate this. So, after takes, you win this pawn for obviously, and this pawn on the side actually can't be defended. So, if you try to defend it with rook here, for example, you have the fork here, so it doesn't work. So you have to defend the fork here, and then you win another pawn. So it just looks very good for white also. And the best move in my opinion is knight c6 here, which is played in 20% of games. And after knight c6 is actually threatening a counterattack on the pawn, so you can't just blindly take black's pawn, or you will actually lose. So the best move here was knight f3, I think, because this is still keeping e4 options open, so this is better than e3. After they play the most common move e6, we can still take here. After they play rook c8, we still have e4 options, so we can still play e4, for example. Or we can even just play bishop f4, which is also winning. So if they play knight b4 in this position, there's also a crazy line where we can play e4. And if they play knight c2 check, we can go over with king d1. And if they actually want to take the pawn, they're actually getting mated. Yeah, if you don't pay attention, you can get mated because it's a different. All the parts of the boards are connected, so to say. That's what e4 does. So after e4, they might also just take it. That also gets just checkmated after here and here. If they try rook b8, which is the most common move, this actually also doesn't stop because the queen is sort of shielding this bishop, so it's also getting mated. And the best move here, I think, was a6. But even then, you still can go in with the knight after bishop e7, which is preventing checkmate here from the queen. You can have stuff like knight c6 forking. So everything is very, very winning here. So now let's go to the next chapter. As you can see, originally you can actually have this in a different. You can actually punish this in a different way. So here, after knight c3, bishop f5, I suggested exchanging the pawns. So sort of an exchange variation. This is sort of the exchangeless variation without no exchange. You can just go queen b3 directly, and it's also strong. And now they have a different, so most of the moves actually transpose, but here they have a different move, which is d takes c. But this is, in this line, you can just go here, and even if they don't lose the rook, you can still get a second pawn. So, after rook c8, for example, defending this pawn, you can go to a4. This is fine. This is not really stronger than any of the other lines. Some of the other lines were stronger, so I don't think this is too strong. And most people will actually play queen b6, which actually looks pretty good. After you exchange, in the other line, this won 2 pawns. Here, this only wins 1 pawn. You take here, and if they take back, this is very bad. So this is once again threatening the fork and winning at least 2 pawns. But actually, most people here actually find the engine move, which is knight f6, which is saying, okay, I actually only want to lose 1 pawn, so if dc, then just pawn takes or even knight takes. Both moves seem to be fine here, and you actually only have lost 1 pawn. So this is why I recommend exchanging, because these lines aren't really better. They're actually slightly worse for white, but they're obviously also still providing an advantage. Good, now I want to talk about the familiar trap, which is the delayed Mankin trap. So after d4, d5, c4, c6, knight c3, if they don't fall for it in quotes and play the most common move here, which is knight f6, you can still try this trap again, which you can do by playing knight f3. And now they can still fall into this trap by playing bishop f5 in this position. As you can see, it's actually very popular still in this position. And here it's only an inaccuracy because it's not so strong to defend this, because one thing is this pawn is actually protected by this knight now in addition. But one upside is that this diagonal from b5 to e8 is can be more easily exploited, because we already have a knight available to jump in to exploit this diagonal immediately. So there's upsides and downsides, but I would say mostly that this isn't so strong for white. So takes again. So one problem here is a lot of people actually take with the knight, and then you actually don't have much. So let's say queen b3, they can just play queen b6. After knight takes, queen takes, knight check just to make the king move, king d8, ab, king takes, and bishop f4 check, king c8. It's not really that convincing for white. We have a slightly higher win rate, but it's not, from the engine evaluation, it isn't that great. So after queen b6 here, for example, or after knight takes c3 here, for example, they also just have b takes, queen b6, bishop f4. It's not really that strong for white. So, but if they once again take with the pawn, then queen b3 will come with more of an effect. So much so that actually the best move here is bishop c8, which is very hard to play because it just looks like you are undeveloping a piece and just completely losing or giving up. So once again, going over the familiar lines, b6, you can once again go for e4, and you just have the exact same idea in the other line where you just crush with e4 95. If you see queen d7, you once again have the exact same idea. Yeah, either 95 or e4 first is fine. Let's say 95. Then the most common move here is queen c7. After e4, you're just completely crushing. Bishop takes is the most common, and after knight here, you can have the same idea here again. Doesn't this also win? No, I don't think it wins. I don't think it wins because you can't play d5 without unprotecting the knight. But for example, putting this bishop here just to attack this queen indirectly, and you can see 90% win rate, engine is off the chart, so you're also winning here. So another move, 13% of game, bishop c8 was played, which looks passive, but as the engine said, it's actually the best move. So actually white can't really punish this in any good way. You can just develop and have a slight advantage, but it's not actually losing any material for black, which is why I still think this line is not that bad as the other line. And after e6, you still have the usual idea of taking here, knight goes here, bishop goes here, and then trying to trap the rook once again. So the most common move here is, what I would consider the main line, or the best response is queen b6. And here you can actually still win the pawn with knight takes. After knight takes, yes, you win the pawn, queen takes, but it's not that clear cut. So after e6, most people go back to b3, and after queen trading, it's maybe not that convincing that white has a real advantage. So win rate is obviously better for white, 59%, but it's still just one double pawn dot here of extra. So yes, this delayed Mankin Trap can also be played without an exchange, which isn't, once again, I don't think is as strong. So knight c3, they make a mistake, and knight f3. Let me delete this move. Knight f6, knight f3, they make a mistake, and queen b3 immediately. As you can see, by far the most common move here is queen b6, so it's even more of an invitation. And yeah, the most common move here is c5, which doesn't look like it provides any advantage, honestly. So after takes, you double your pawns, which is usually considered bad, but in this line and in some familiar, some related London lines, it's actually good because you open up the rook, so the rook has been activated without any extra moves, and you will push this pawn forward and get rid of the doubled pawn, so the weakness, you can get rid of it, and then you actually won't be worse and will just have a more active piece. So after knight b2 d7, you can execute this plan immediately by playing b4. Most common move e6, and then just b5 immediately, and this this is sort of flirting with the idea of maybe forking here, maybe applying some pressure on the queen side. and obviously undoubling the pawns. So most common move is bishop e7, then bishop f4, and then after castles, for example, it's a fine game. White has an advantage. Okay, in this position it's 80% win rate actually, but I don't think it's such an overwhelming advantage as in the other positions. Yes, and I provided also a summary here for when you should play what. So after d4, d5, c4, c6, knight c3, bishop f5, cd, cd, queen b3. I've tried to label all the different moves. So basically, if we see either of the green moves, so if we see knight coming here or pawn coming here, which is basically protecting d5, maybe you can remember it that way, then we want to go here with the queen and then go after this diagonal. So this is what the green moves mean. And the red moves is the other main variation, which is if the queen goes here or if the pawn goes here, which weaken this diagonal. And in that case, we want to play e4, knight f3, and knight e5. And obviously this move also, but yeah. I didn't want to add even more errors because that might have been a little bit confusing. The move that's not pictured here is knight c6, but in that case it's mostly similar to the green moves. So green is sort of okay moves and red moves are the trouble moves, which is also something you can remember. So if this, then we just start with knight f3 and then mostly go in the same as the green moves, because as I said, it's the strongest thing in my opinion. And yeah, if queen b6, as I said, you can just take it, but you can also just calculate what happens after queen b6. Okay, so this would be all in my video. So I hope this actually helps anyone, because maybe strong players don't watch these videos or can't use this knowledge, and weak players don't watch these videos. So maybe it's a bit confusing or complicated, but some of the variations, you don't have to remember everything, you just have to remember what the plan for punishing is. And then you can actually gain a pretty large advantage, especially if they play one of the red moves. Yeah, so I hope you can win some games with this right out of the opening if you're a Queen's Gambit player, and thanks for watching.